The WWE landscape is shaking right now as a result of what went down between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. So stop whatever you're doing, and let me tell you the full story, because Monday Night Raw just turned into ground zero for the biggest power grab in WWE history. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar didn't just crush the roster tonight, they hijacked the main event, rewrote the stakes for SummerSlam, and unveiled a cryptic manifesto that has every superstar scrambling. Buckle up, smash that subscribe button, and let's break it down. Raw was supposed to wrap with a straightforward championship bout, Seth Rollins defending against LA Knight. 10 minutes into the match, the tron flickered to black. In its place flashed 3 red letters, YTC, and the arena went dark. By the time the lights snapped back on, Roman Reigns stood on the stage flanked by Paul Heyman, looking every bit the returning conqueror. But the real jaw-dropper? Brock Lesnar storming in from the crowd with a chain-wrapped steel chair, eyes locked on Rollins. Act 1, Misdirection. Reigns never stepped between the ropes. Instead, he signaled to Lesnar, who dismantled LA Knight with a single F5 on the announce table, then tossed that chain across the ring like a gauntlet. The message: nobody's title reign is safe. Act 2, The Muted Alliance. Rather than spear Rollins, Reigns calmly handed him the YTC-branded manifesto. 10 glossy pages stamped yield the crown. Rollins, stunned, barely noticed Lesnar roaring back up the ramp behind him. No fists thrown, just a silent contract of intent. Act 3, The Double Cross. As security swarmed, Lesnar re-entered, leveled Rollins with the chair he'd left ringside, and draped a black bomber jacket over the champ's body, front and center, the YTC logo in crimson. Reigns never interfered. He simply watched, then exited through the crowd, disappearing into the sea of cell phone lights. What in the world is YTC? Within minutes, Yield the Crown cracked the worldwide trend list. Theories exploded, a hostile takeover, Reigns and Lesnar uniting to scoop every men's title before 2025 ends. A shadow faction, rumors swirl that 2 more megastars, names backstage are whispering Cody Rhodes and Gunther, already signed the manifesto. A one-night pact. Could this be Lesnar's typical smash and dash with Reigns piggybacking the chaos? Even top brass were blindsided. Back-of-house reports say Triple H scrapped 2 upcoming Payback matches on the spot, unsure how to book around YTC's demands. Paul Heyman's split-second grin told its own story. The wise man might be orchestrating a chessboard we haven't even seen yet. Meanwhile, Rollins is receiving medical evaluation, LA Knight's title aspirations are in limbo, and SummerSlam's card is officially ripped to pieces. One thing is crystal clear: when Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar act in unison, the rest of the locker room stops acting altogether, they start running. So, what's your theory? Does YTC mean Yield the Crown, or you're totally crushed? Drop your hottest take in the comments, obliterate that like button, and subscribe. Because if tonight proved anything, it's that the new era of Raw won't wait for anyone. YTC is here, and the countdown to total domination has already started. Stop whatever you're doing. Seriously, pause the scroll, silence the group chat, close every tab that's not this one. Because what happened on Monday Night Raw wasn't just a swerve. It wasn't a return, a surprise booking change, or even a well-timed chair shot to close the night. It was a statement. A seismic, scripted detonation that turned the core of WWE into freefall. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar didn't just crash Raw, they rewrote it. They didn't interrupt, they erased the order of things. What began as a straightforward championship main event ended in silent chaos, a brand new symbol projected on every screen in the arena, and a 10-page manifesto delivered in the middle of a wrestling ring like it was a declaration of war. And that war may already be lost. Welcome to the age of YTC. For the fans watching at home, Raw felt predictable, until it wasn't. On paper, the night was built around a clean, crowd-pleasing closer, Seth Rollins defending his World Heavyweight Championship against LA Knight. No outside interference teased. No backstage brawls or cryptic QR codes. Just a top-tier athlete versus a rising fan favorite. Rollins entered first, sporting his usual kaleidoscopic ring gear and signature manic energy. The crowd was electric. Signs waved. Phones recorded. Chants alternated between "burn it down" and "yeah," the two biggest catchphrases in the company colliding in real time. This was WWE giving fans exactly what they wanted, right before taking it all away. 10 minutes in, the match hit full throttle. LA Knight had just reversed a Falcon Arrow into a power slam when the Tron flickered, not a usual video cue, not a promo package, not even a production mistake. Just static. Then, black. Then, 3 glowing red letters, pulsing like a heartbeat across the Titantron. YTC. No sound. No explanation. No pyro. The arena lights cut out instantly. Silence fell. That dangerous, electric kind of silence only wrestling crowds can create. The kind that feels loaded. Ticking. And then he appeared. Roman Reigns, standing atop the ramp. Shoulders square. Eyes locked forward. Heyman behind him, fingers clasped like a prayer. No music. No movement. Just presence. But if that wasn't enough to flip every chair in the building, the next moment blew the roof off. From the crowd, through the stands, not the ramp, Brock Lesnar emerged, dragging a chain-wrapped steel chair like it was his chosen weapon in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. His eyes weren't scanning the crowd. They were locked on Seth Rollins. And here's the thing, Lesnar didn't run. He stalked. One heavy boot after another. Back in the ring, Rollins stood frozen. Half in shock, half calculating how the hell this made sense. LA Knight, still recovering from the power slam reversal, had no such luxury. Brock hit the ring. 1 F5. No wasted motion. Knight's body bounced off the announce table like it was made of air. The chain never even got used. That was just the punctuation mark. The threat. Reigns didn't move. Didn't blink. He just watched. Then came the part that turned confusion into something bigger, something far more dangerous. Reigns didn't attack. He didn't lift a finger. He stepped to the apron, looked Rollins dead in the face, and handed him a glossy, 10-page folder stamped with a crimson crown and the letters YTC embossed in bold. That's when everything changed. What was yield the crown? Nobody knew. But within 3 minutes of that broadcast cut, the phrase trended globally. Twitter. TikTok. Reddit. Discord servers. Wrestling forums. Fan pages. Text threads. People weren't just reacting. They were dissecting, speculating, theorizing like detectives on an unsolved case. Something was happening behind the spectacle. This wasn't just a surprise attack. This was planned. Surgical. Measured. And yet, completely unannounced. No dirt sheet had it. No spoiler sites leaked it. Even the WWE roster, according to a quickly pulled Instagram story from an unnamed backstage staffer, had no clue what the hell just happened. The match schedule for Payback was quietly pulled from WWE. Calm within the hour. Triple H? Silent. Michael Cole's follow-up tweet? Deleted. Meanwhile, Paul Heyman's subtle, near imperceptible smirk was replayed more than 1.2 million times across all platforms by the next morning. Because here's the scary part, it wasn't about who attacked who. It was about why nobody stopped it. As security flooded the ring post-broadcast and Rollins lay unconscious under a black bomber jacket marked with the same red logo, Reigns vanished. Not through the back, but into the crowd. He didn't look back. Didn't explain himself. He disappeared into a sea of fans like a shadow melting into night. This wasn't a return. This was an ultimatum. The manifesto remains sealed. Its contents are unknown. But its message is already clear, the age of the locker room being safe is over. Rollins is injured. LA Knight is humiliated. SummerSlam is up in flames before it's even booked. Reigns and Lesnar, eternal rivals. Just flip the chessboard, and everyone's looking around trying to figure out if they're a pawn or a target. And the rest of the WWE universe? We're watching from the sidelines as the kingdom burns. But let's be real, WWE isn't new to chaos. Over the years, we've seen invasions, betrayals, heel turns, pipe bombs, and unannounced cash-ins. What makes this different isn't the violence. It's the silence that followed it. The strategic ambiguity. The deliberate lack of explanation. Roman Reigns didn't say a word. Brock Lesnar didn't cut a promo. Paul Heyman didn't pick up a mic. No catchphrase. No tribal chief monologue. No beast incarnate threat. Only that cold-blooded stare, a manifesto, and a moment that left every WWE superstar and every fan asking the same question: what just happened? Yield the crown. It sounds like a slogan. But it might be something more dangerous. A mission statement. A demand. A declaration that titles don't belong to the best. They belong to the most ruthless. And if that's the new law of the land, then WWE's golden age just shattered. That night didn't just introduce a new faction or reboot an old rivalry. It introduced a power shift. A hostile claim. A new hierarchy that's already rewriting the rules before we've even seen the first full chapter. Let's rewind. Why now? Why would two of WWE's most dominant, selfish, unpredictable forces, Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, coordinate like this? These are men who have spent the better part of a decade trying to break each other in half. And yet, here they were, two former world champions, two legends, one silent unit. No dissension. No power struggle. For 10 whole minutes, they moved like clockwork. One stood. One struck. One passed a message. One walked away. There's no way this was a one-off. No way Lesnar just decided to show up and destroy LA Knight for fun. Not when Reigns was already there. Not when the screens were preloaded with that YTC logo. Not when a 10-page document showed up out of nowhere, custom printed, embossed, and ready for hand delivery in the middle of Raw. This was coordinated. This was rehearsed. Which means the WWE locker room was kept in the dark, on purpose. Even the commentary team didn't have a script. Their confusion was real. Kevin Patrick fumbled his headset. Corey Graves was dead silent for nearly 30 seconds. And after the feed cut, WWE went to black. No outro. No post-match promo. Just a hard stop. Do you know how rare that is? WWE doesn't do accidental silence. Even during real injuries or mid-match chaos, they push something to fill the gap. But this time, the gap was the point. That silence spoke louder than anything Reigns or Lesnar could have said on a mic. So what's inside that manifesto? We'll break that down in the next chapter. But for now, here's what we know. Rollins was left holding it before being stretchered out. Security didn't retrieve it. No camera zoomed in. No digital copy was posted online. No graphics team shared an update. The only clue was the YTC insignia burned onto the front cover. And then there's the timing. Roman Reigns has been off television for weeks. Lesnar longer. Both men were assumed to be on hiatus through the fall, possibly saving returns for Survivor Series build-up. Their sudden appearance wasn't just ahead of schedule. It tore up the schedule entirely. Payback's card? Scrapped. Championship momentum? Derailed. SummerSlam? Unbookable right now. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to admit: if Yield the Crown is more than a slogan, if it's a doctrine, a movement, a war plan, then WWE is no longer in control of its own storyline. The company that has always claimed to control the narrative just got out-narrated. Outbooked. Outplayed. And they never saw it coming. The fans sure didn't. Neither did the talent. And right now, backstage is in full lockdown mode. Socials are quiet. Leaks have slowed. Agents are refusing interviews. Even Heyman's usual late-night post-show commentary never surfaced. WWE's machine is good at spinning chaos into content, but this? This is silence on purpose. Calculated chaos. That's the danger. And it's what makes this moment bigger than any swerve, turn, or betrayal in recent memory. Because it's not just about Reigns and Lesnar returning. It's about them not needing to say a single word to flip the power structure upside down. This isn't about brand wars. It's not about face versus heel. It's about legitimacy. Ownership. Control. Yield the crown isn't asking for submission, it's warning of removal. You don't yield willingly. You yield because the other option is annihilation. So buckle up. What we're witnessing might be the opening shot of WWE's biggest internal war since the NWO invaded WCW. But this time, it's not an external threat. It's coming from within. And it's already started. Let's break it down. Before the lights went out. Before Roman Reigns walked through the fog like a returning emperor. Before Brock Lesnar turned the announce table into a wreckage site. Raw was routine. Predictable. Safe. This night was supposed to be one of those cards WWE throws together to keep the gears turning. A tune-up for bigger pay-per-view implications. A solid mix of mid-card matches and one major headliner to give fans a reason to stick around. Nothing revolutionary. Just solid wrestling. The advertised main event? Seth Rollins vs. LA Knight for the World Heavyweight Championship. 2 crowd favorites. 1 champ, 1 challenger. Both red hot. No weird interference teases. No vague tension backstage. No special stipulations. On paper, it was simple. That's exactly why it worked, until it didn't. This was supposed to be LA Knight's breakout. His climb has been methodical. Ever since Money in the Bank, WWE's been slow burning his push, testing him in tag matches, throwing him into verbal showdowns, giving him moments but never the full torch. But this was different. A main event slot on Raw, title shot on the line, promo packages cut during commercial breaks all night. Commentators kept hammering the same narrative, is this LA Knight's time? He opened the show with a tight backstage promo. Nothing flashy, just that signature delivery, confidence, charisma, and a smirk that made the crowd yell yeah before he even spoke. There were no cheap shots. No brawls. Just the tone of a man showing up to win. Not steal the show. Win it. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins came in as the anchor. The glue holding the new world title picture together since the belt's creation. Love him or not, Rollins has been dependable. Flashy, stable, and undeniably skilled. He's had workhorse reigns before, but this time felt different. More calculated. Like he was finally being trusted as the guy on Raw. This main event? It was the culmination of clean booking, good faith, and weeks of crowd investment. Production prepped the ring with a main event level feel. New LED graphics. Tailored lighting design. The energy in the building was real. Not piped in real, organic real. Fans were chanting for both men. Signs for LA Knight were everywhere. Kids in Rollins gear were losing their minds. You could feel it. WWE had built something. Even commentary was in on it. Graves played up the respect factor. Patrick talked about 2 alphas, 2 men who thrive under pressure, the kind of match that reminds you why Raw is the flagship. By the time the bell rang, no one was talking about surprises. Everyone was expecting a wrestling clinic. Something clean, entertaining, and important enough to matter for SummerSlam momentum. That's what made the collapse so devastating. There were no warning signs. No odd camera pans backstage. No unexplained QR code glitches. No commentary slip-ups or unscheduled promos. Not even a weird promo from Paul Heyman earlier in the night, which, in hindsight, was probably the biggest red flag of all. Because when Paul Heyman doesn't speak, that's when you start worrying. Still, in the moment, none of that was obvious. The match began like clockwork. Rollins opened with speed, LA Knight countered with brute efficiency. Back and forth. Clean reversals. Crowd reactions in sync with every near fall. You could feel it building toward something epic. Maybe not a title change, but certainly a statement. The crowd was settling in for a 20-minute roller coaster. Then, minute 10. Knight had Rollins set for blunt force trauma, reversing a super kick attempt and slamming Rollins shoulder first into the corner post. Rollins staggered, bounced into the ropes, and that's when the Tron flickered. The lights glitched. The graphics blinked out. Everything went dark. People thought it was a technical error. That's how seamless the setup was. WWE had been too good lately about protecting their product, so the crowd's first instinct was to assume a botch. Then, the Tron turned fully black. A single low-frequency hum echoed across the arena. No voice. No music. Just 3 blood-red letters pulsing against a black void. YTC. No one had seen this before. No fan-made logos. No previous promos. No QR code trail like the Bray Wyatt comeback. Just, YTC. Then the lights snapped off completely. In that moment, the audience turned. Confusion gave way to excitement. People started standing. Phones went up. Some fans screamed out of instinct. Others just stood frozen, mouths open, waiting. The lights returned. But not all at once. Just one spotlight. One man. Roman Reigns. No music. No entrance. No pyro. Just him. In full gear. Center stage. Flanked by Paul Heyman, whose hands were folded like he was holding back an earthquake. At first, it didn't register. Some people thought it was a weird camera angle. That it couldn't actually be Reigns. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not booked. Not teased. Not even hinted at in the rumor mill. But there he was. No smile. No sneer. No mic. Just standing. And then, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. Brock Lesnar emerged from the crowd. No music. No intro. He didn't run. He stalked. Chain-wrapped chair in hand, he moved like a predator who already knew where his prey would fall. Back in the ring, Rollins stared up the ramp, trying to understand what he was seeing. LA Knight, still recovering from the post-corner slam, never saw Lesnar coming. It happened in a blur. F5 onto the announce table. No taunt. No pose. Just impact. Fans erupted. Commentators went mute. The match never resumed. The show never got back on track. WWE didn't even ring the bell again. There was no official end. Because everything we were promised for Raw that night? It died the moment YTC hit the screen. Everything WWE had promoted was gone. Storylines? Suspended. Rankings? Irrelevant. SummerSlam implications? Obliterated. In their place, one acronym, one silent alliance, and one message scrawled across the ruins of what was supposed to be a defining night for two of the brand's most consistent stars. WWE called it Monday Night Raw. But what we got was a hostile rewrite. And the worst part? It worked. Because instead of ending with a championship celebration, or a cliffhanger brawl, Raw ended in silence. The Tron off. The lights dimmed. The ring abandoned. And one question echoing across the internet like a siren: what has yielded the crown? Silence in WWE is never accidental. When the lights go out and nothing happens right away, that's not hesitation. That's control. And on this night, YTC controlled everything. The interruption came precisely 10 minutes into the main event, right when momentum peaked, right when the match had everyone hooked. There was no countdown. No mystery opponent warning. No arena lighting cue to suggest anything was coming. Just a clean, clinical severing of the broadcast feed. First, the LED apron glitched. The graphics lining the ring went fuzzy, almost like old VHS static. Then the corner post lights cut. The overhead truss lights dimmed, one by one. Commentary didn't even try to cover it. Kevin Patrick stammered, "We seem to be, having some sort of technical," then the entire screen went black. No logo. No music. No voiceover. Just 3 letters faded in, slow, glowing, blood red. YTC. The font was unlike anything WWE had used before. Brutalist. Stark. Letters slightly off-center, like they'd been stamped by hand. Not symmetrical. Not cinematic. Not WWE polished. It looked rogue. The crowd didn't react immediately. They weren't sure it was part of the show. For 3 full seconds, the arena was eerily quiet, no boos, no cheers, just flickers of cell phone flashlights bouncing in the dark. Then a low, metallic sound rolled in. Not music, just a mechanical, droning tone. Like a siren with the pitch tuned down until it sounded almost alive. That's when people started getting out of their seats. Phone shot up. Security along the ring barrier visibly tightened formation. Camera operators huddled behind ringside monitors like even they hadn't been briefed. And in the ring, Seth Rollins looked toward the Tron like he was seeing it for the first time. And maybe he was. YTC hadn't been mentioned once before this moment. No foreshadowing. No breadcrumb trail. Not even in fan theories. This was ground zero. The Tron faded to black again. The lights returned, not gradually, but with a snap. And standing at the top of the ramp was Roman Reigns. But it wasn't his usual entrance. There was no theme music. No slow turn with the Universal title draped across his shoulder. No wisecracks from Corey Graves about the tribal chief returning to clean up the mess. Just stillness. Reigns stood in full gear. Black boots, black vest, gloves laced. Paul Heyman behind him, breathing like he'd run a marathon, but his eyes didn't leave the ring. Not once. The crowd finally reacted. Half stood and cheered. The other half stood in confusion. Roman Reigns hadn't appeared on Raw in over a year. His domain was SmackDown. His aura carefully curated. His bloodline storyline, slow and methodical, had dominated Friday nights for the past 3 years. But this wasn't SmackDown. This was hostile territory. And Reigns didn't care. He wasn't flanked by the Usos. No Solo. No bloodline in sight. Just Heyman, silent as the grave, and a burning stare locked straight ahead at Seth Rollins. The commentary booth said nothing. Because what could they say? No breaking news. No, "Oh my God, it's Reigns." Just, breathing. And boots on the ramp. And then, without warning, from the left side of the lower deck crowd, the audience erupted. A figure was forcing his way through the crowd. Fans parted like waves. Ushers didn't stop him. Security let him through. It was Brock Lesnar. In street gear, jeans, boots, black tank, dragging behind him a chain-wrapped steel chair. And unlike most surprise appearances, this wasn't some quick sprint to the ring. Brock didn't run. He stalked. Measured steps. Head low. Chair dragging across concrete. Sparks occasionally kicking up. And even now, with 15,000 fans screaming, Lesnar never looked at them. His eyes were locked on Rollins the whole time. There was no entrance music. No pyrotechnics. No commentary hype. No production overlay. Raw, at this point, had become something else entirely. It wasn't a wrestling show anymore. It was a live hostage broadcast. In the ring, LA Knight staggered to his feet. He saw Lesnar. He barely had time to register before Brock slid into the ring, grabbed him around the waist, and launched him into the sky. 1F5. Through the announce table. No build-up. No signature taunt. Just brutal, clean destruction. The crowd gasped in real time. Rollins moved toward the ropes like he was preparing to fight, but he hesitated. Not out of fear, but calculation. Reigns still hadn't moved. Lesnar had done the damage and stepped away from the ring like nothing had happened. Then it happened. Reigns stepped forward. Not into the ring. Just onto the apron. And instead of throwing a punch, he held out his hand. In it, a black folder. Leather-bound. 10 pages thick. He held it out like a gift. Rollins, now standing alone in the ring, reached for it. No fight. No words. No challenge. He took the folder. And Reigns stepped back down from the apron. That was it. No monologue. No stare down. Just an exchange. That folder would become known within the hour as the YTC Manifesto. WWE's internal security would later say they had never seen the document before. Production staff were told to stand down and let it happen. Even veteran agents like Michael Hayes and Jamie Noble were reportedly left off the call sheet for this segment. The mystery was total. Fans at home didn't even know the broadcast was still running. There was no commentary. No crowd cutaways. Just a steady wide shot of the ring, Rollins holding the manifesto, Lesnar circling on the outside, and Reigns walking back up the ramp, disappearing into the entranceway. Except he didn't exit backstage. He turned around and walked back through the crowd. He didn't smile. He didn't taunt. He just melted into the sea of flashlights like a soldier exiting the battlefield. And then the screen went black again. The YTC logo reappeared, faster this time. Pulsing brighter. And then nothing. That was how Raw ended. No recap. No replay. No explanation. Just the image of Rollins holding a black folder, LA Knight broken on the floor, and the two most dominant men in WWE walking away without ever touching each other. That's when people understood this wasn't an interruption. It was a message. The age of statements made by microphone was over. This was a declaration made with silence, symbols, and strategy. And yield the crown? It had just begun. Roman Reigns didn't walk out to his theme music. He didn't need pyro. He didn't need a microphone. His presence was enough. And on this night, that presence shifted the gravitational field of WWE. The return of Roman Reigns wasn't framed like a comeback. It wasn't announced as a headliner. It wasn't even acknowledged by the commentary team, because there was no commentary. No voice to interpret what the crowd was witnessing. The tribal chief appeared not as a man with something to say, but as a ruler here to collect what's his. Reigns stood on the Raw stage in full battle gear. Not a suit. Not a designer hoodie. Black tactical pants, boots laced tight, his black vest unzipped just enough to flash the symbol of his reign. That silver tribal insignia stamped across his chest. Not a man out for revenge. Not a mercenary. A monarch, returning to find someone else wearing his crown. And behind him, Paul Heyman. Heyman wasn't holding a title. He wasn't hyping the crowd. He wasn't whispering in Roman's ear. He was watching. Because this wasn't business. This was conquest. What made Reigns' return terrifying wasn't that he walked onto a brand he hadn't touched in a year. It was that he walked on it like he still owned it. Like his absence was just a recess. Like Raw was still bloodline territory, and Seth Rollins was an illegal tenant. He didn't look left. He didn't acknowledge the fans. He didn't wink at the camera. He stood still, with his hands by his sides, eyes locked on the ring, and waited. He waited for Brock Lesnar to do the damage. That's what made it feel different. Reigns didn't act. He commanded. And in doing so, he made a statement far louder than any promo could have. I don't need to fight to be feared. I don't need to speak to be understood. My presence is the message. It was a masterclass in power psychology. Rollins, for all his brilliance, has always operated in the realm of chaos. Flash. Speed. Mind games. But even he, standing face to face with Reigns again after years apart, didn't raise his fists. Didn't shout. Didn't posture. He stood still. Because even without a punch thrown, everyone in the building felt the shift. Reigns wasn't there to challenge. He was there to confirm. This wasn't his return to WWE. This was WWE returning to him. But here's what you need to understand, Reigns and Raw were never supposed to mix again. Since the creation of the New World Heavyweight Championship, Reigns had remained on SmackDown, holding the undisputed WWE Universal title in a death grip while Raw went back to basics. A workhorse brand with a fighting champion. Seth Rollins was crowned to give fans a sense of structure. To make the title picture clear again. Reigns, meanwhile, built an empire on Friday nights with the Bloodline storyline, slow, dramatic, operatic. But this night broke that line. And when Roman Reigns stepped back onto Monday Night Raw, uninvited and unopposed, that was the moment every brand split, every draft, every brand exclusive rule started to rot. Because Roman doesn't follow structure. He is structure. And now he was back where it all began, with zero explanation, zero limits, and one silent mission: reclaim everything. The last time Reigns was on Raw in a meaningful way, it was during his run as the big dog, pre-heel turn, pre-tribal chief transformation. Back then, he was a reliable workhorse, a franchise face who never really clicked the way John Cena did. That version of Roman was booed out of buildings. Overproduced. Overpushed. But this Roman? This is a different animal. This Roman doesn't need the fans. He doesn't need approval. He just needs the moment, and when the moment came, he didn't waste a second. Lesnar's attack on LA Knight was calculated to clear the space. Not for a brawl. For a ritual. That's what the handoff of the manifesto felt like. A ritual. Reigns didn't beat down Rollins. He didn't spear him. He didn't mock him. He stepped to the apron, reached into his vest, and pulled out the 10-page leather-bound folder that has now sent WWE into a tailspin. And without speaking a word, he handed it over like a king delivering a decree to a pretender. In that moment, Rollins wasn't a champion. He was a recipient. He received that folder not with pride, but caution. Confusion. Maybe even fear. Reigns didn't wait to see how Rollins would react. He didn't need to. His point had been made. He stepped back. Down the steel steps. Onto the floor. And for a second, you might have thought he was going to leave through the tunnel. But he didn't. He walked into the crowd. Not down the ramp. Not toward Gorilla. Into the audience. And not in a look-at-me way. Not in a Roman Reigns victory lap. He vanished into the people like a war general returning to his loyal army. Fans didn't even try to reach out and touch him. They just stared. Because when a man like Reigns moves like that, you don't get in his way. You get out of it. That's when people started piecing it together. He didn't come back for a fight. He came back for a reset. The last time we saw Roman Reigns on WWE programming, he was licking his wounds from a bloodline betrayal. Solo Sikoa had nearly cracked the foundation of the empire. Jey Uso had stepped away. Jimmy was MIA. The family was splintering. It was the first time in 3 years Reigns looked vulnerable. But this return? This wasn't a wounded leader. This was a king without a council, who no longer needed one. No Usos. No Solo. Just Reigns and Heyman. The only pairing that ever truly mattered. Heyman didn't say a word either. He didn't carry a mic, didn't explain anything. But if you watched closely, you saw it. That grin. The smallest, cruelest, most satisfied half-smile as Rollins stared at the document in his hands, unsure of what it meant. That told you everything. Heyman was in on it. And not just as an advisor. As an architect. Because this wasn't just Reigns reclaiming Raw. It was Reigns reclaiming narrative control. Through silence. Through action. Through Lesnar. Yes, even Lesnar. The most unpredictable man in pro wrestling history moved in sync with Roman Reigns. No argument. No cheap shot. No posturing. They operated like a unit. And for a moment, fans were stunned into forgetting the most obvious truth in WWE history: Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar hate each other. Their rivalry has been one of the bloodiest, most personal feuds of the modern era. Suplex cities. Spear barrages. WrestleMania main events. Double turn chaos. Bloodied bodies. Destruction. And yet, on this night, they stood aligned. Why? Because this was never about respect. This was about purpose. And on this night, their purposes aligned. Not for a tag match. Not for faction pride. For something bigger. A doctrine. Yield the crown. The meaning isn't confirmed yet. But Reigns' return made the definition painfully clear: this isn't about titles anymore. It's about legitimacy. And the legitimacy of any champion who didn't beat Roman Reigns is in question. So when Reigns returned, he didn't return as the Universal Champion. He returned as the only champion who matters. And now that he's stepped back into the chaos, unannounced, untouched, and unopposed, what happens next isn't up to anyone else. It's up to him. There are very few constants in WWE. One of them is this: when Brock Lesnar enters a building, someone is going to get hurt. But this time? It wasn't a surprise return. It was a surgical strike. This wasn't chaos for entertainment. It was execution, planned, positioned, and perfectly timed. The crowd didn't even register him at first. All eyes were on Roman Reigns standing at the top of the ramp in eerie silence. Fans were trying to process why the tribal chief had returned to Raw without warning, without a microphone, and without a championship belt. So when the first ripple of screams began rolling through the lower stands, it took a few seconds for anyone to understand what was happening. Then they saw him. Brock Lesnar. No lights. No music. No camera pan. Just Brock, coming in through the crowd like a sledgehammer in human form. Black boots. Worn jeans. Sleeveless hoodie. And in his right hand, dragging behind him across the floor like a warning bell in hell, a steel chair wrapped in chain. Fans scrambled to get out of the way as he barreled through the rows. His eyes were locked forward, and every step looked calculated, less like a man walking to the ring and more like a missile guiding itself to its target. No posing. No theatrics. Just brute movement. Security didn't stop him. They wouldn't dare. Lesnar wasn't sneaking in. He was walking through like he owned the building. And somehow, that was scarier. Once he reached ringside, Brock didn't acknowledge the crowd, didn't even glance at the commentary table. He slid into the ring with fluid aggression, like a predator that had waited just long enough to make sure its prey couldn't run. Inside the ring, Seth Rollins was still on his feet, confused but aware. LA Knight, less lucky, had just pulled himself to the ropes, trying to recover from Rollins' earlier offense. He never saw Brock coming. Lesnar wrapped both arms around Knight's waist, lifted him high into the air like he was throwing a bag of bones, and slammed him face first through the announce table with an F5 so clean it looked rehearsed. It wasn't. You don't rehearse an execution. The table exploded on impact. Monitors flew. Pieces of the desk launched into the barricade. LA Knight's body bounced off the wreckage and hit the floor like a man shot out of a cannon. No one moved. Not commentary. Not security. Not even the fans. The sound of the impact had vacuumed the air out of the arena. And Lesnar? He stood over the destruction for maybe 3 seconds. Then he turned. And locked eyes with Seth Rollins. There was no grin. No scream. Just that cold-blooded stare that Brock has perfected over 20 years of wrecking everything in his path. Rollins didn't move. He gripped the ropes like he was ready for a fight, but he didn't advance. Because here's the thing, even the bravest champion knows when a fight isn't winnable. Rollins had just seen LA Knight reduced to rubble in under 10 seconds. And behind him, Reigns hadn't flinched. He wasn't shouting commands. He wasn't intervening. He was watching. And Lesnar? He wasn't pacing. He wasn't breathing heavy. He was waiting. That's when it became obvious, this wasn't a brawl. This wasn't Lesnar acting alone. This was coordination. And Lesnar wasn't the beast. He was the enforcer. He didn't lay a finger on Seth Rollins, not yet. Instead, he took the chain-wrapped chair, lifted it slowly like it was a crown forged in iron, and tossed it into the ring. The chair hit the mat with a sickening clang. It didn't slide. It thudded. And it stayed there, in the center of the ring, like a declaration. And then Lesnar backed off. He didn't charge. He didn't rush. He rolled out of the ring and began circling it, eyes still on Rollins. The crowd was at a fever pitch, every fan expecting the spear, the suplex, the collapse. But it didn't come. Instead, Reigns stepped onto the apron. Calm. Precise. And handed Rollins the YTC manifesto. That wasn't an accident. Lesnar's violence had cleared the path. It made Rollins vulnerable. It destabilized the arena. It put every eye on the ring, not out of curiosity, but out of survival instinct. People needed to see what came next because nobody felt safe. Rollins looked down at the manifesto like it was radioactive. He didn't open it. He didn't throw it down. He held it. And in that moment, Lesnar completed his loop around the ring, climbed the steel steps, and stopped. Then he smiled. Not the wide, wild grin we'd seen before. This was controlled. Like he'd done exactly what was asked of him, and more. And then he turned around and walked back up the ramp. He didn't look at Reigns. He didn't wait for a cue. He left like a man who'd finished the job. But Raw wasn't done with him yet. Because just as Rollins lowered the manifesto to his side, trying to breathe, Lesnar returned. From the side. Quick. Brutal. Silent. He slid under the bottom rope, snatched the chain-wrapped chair from the mat, and cracked it across Rollins' back like he was trying to erase his spine. The sound echoed through the arena like thunder in a church. Rollins collapsed. Lesnar stood over him for only a moment. Then he reached into a black duffel bag on the outside of the ring, one that hadn't been there earlier, and pulled out something that made the air go ice cold, a black bomber jacket. He unfolded it slowly. On the back, stitched in blood-red thread, were those same 3 letters, YTC. He draped the jacket across Rollins' body. Not in mockery. In message. Not just beaten. Not just injured. Branded. That's when commentary finally kicked in. Graves' voice cracked as he muttered, "What the hell is happening?" Patrick tried to ask, Is this a takeover? A message? But even he sounded unsure. Security rushed the ring far too late. Lesnar didn't resist. He didn't fight them off. He just smiled again and left the ring without a single punch thrown. He didn't run. He didn't sneak. He left through the crowd, like Reigns had. Like they were following a script only they understood. And the ring? Was silent. Seth Rollins lay face down with a manifesto under one hand and a bomber jacket draped across his back like a funeral shroud. The champion had been claimed. No match. No bell. No words. Only violence. Only silence. And only YTC. What makes a move brilliant isn't just execution, it's the illusion that it wasn't coming. That no one saw it. That nobody even thought to look for it. And that's exactly what Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar pulled off. This wasn't a return. It was a performance. And the theme of Act 1 was misdirection. Every piece of this chaos was designed to make you look the wrong way until it was already too late. Let's start with the most critical piece of misdirection. Roman Reigns never entered the ring. Not once. He didn't attack Seth Rollins. Didn't spear LA Knight. Didn't raise his fists. He didn't even touch the ropes. All he did was show up, hand Rollins a document, and vanish. In any other context, that would be considered an action. A cameo. A non-confrontation. But in this context, when the arena had already been cracked open by Lesnar's assault, when the announcers had gone silent, when the air was thick with questions, that non-action was the most threatening act of the night. It was calculated restraint. Roman let Brock do the dirty work. He let Brock throw the chair. Destroy the table. Crack Rollins' spine. But he delivered the message. Think about that. Reigns, known for years as the spear first talk later champion, stood perfectly still while the beast did the damage. That's not just misdirection. That's theater. It told the entire roster one thing: Roman doesn't need to fight anymore to win. He delegates destruction. And Lesnar? He's never been anyone's henchman. He's a force of nature. A one-man catastrophe. He's flipped ambulances, broken cages, destroyed rings. But on this night, he took instructions without a word. He didn't turn on Reigns. He didn't blindside him. He didn't even look at him wrong. Which brings us to the second misdirection: this wasn't a betrayal. It wasn't a double turn. If anything, it was the opposite. It was unity, unspoken, uneasy, and terrifying. Two men who hate each other aligned for something even bigger than a belt. That's the psychological mind game here. Because every fan in that arena was waiting for one moment, the inevitable turn. It's Brock and Roman. You expect them to self-destruct. You anticipate the punch, the sneak attack, the payoff to a decade of wars. And that's why this moment landed harder. Because it never came. Instead of combusting, they combined. Instead of bloodshed between them, they let others bleed on their behalf. It was restraint as a weapon. And here's the real misdirection that made the whole act work: it wasn't about the fight. It was about the message. The chair? The F5? The jacket? They were just punctuation. The real story was the folder. That black leather-bound document with YTC pressed into its cover like a royal seal was the actual bomb dropped on Raw. And it didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence. Rollins didn't even fight it. The moment Roman extended it, Rollins took it like a man being handed a subpoena. Like refusing to accept it would somehow make things worse. Because deep down, every champion knows when the rules have changed. This wasn't about Rollins losing a match. There was no match. This was about Rollins being informed, by gesture, that he was now in the crosshairs of something far bigger than a title defense. And that's what misdirection is really about. It's not hiding what you're doing. It's making them believe you came for one thing when you were always after another. Let's break it down. The audience thought Lesnar returned to challenge for the World Heavyweight title. They thought Reigns came back to finish unfinished bloodline business. They thought this would explode into another Brock versus Roman war. None of that happened. Because none of that was the point. This wasn't a moment of escalation. It was a moment of replacement. The old title chase, the old rivalries, the familiar booking rhythms? Gone. Replaced with something colder. More strategic. Less about belts, more about control. And every move was made to distract from that. Even the chain-wrapped chair, a dramatic visual if there ever was one, was never used until the end. It sat in the corner of the ring, silent and menacing, while Roman delivered the manifesto. It wasn't a weapon. It was a prop. The audience stared at it, expecting chaos. And while they watched the chair, they missed the real war starting, on paper. It's storytelling 101. You put the shiny object front and center so no one sees the hand reaching for the knife behind the curtain. That's what Yield the Crown is. A knife behind a curtain. No promo. No group debut. No new faction walking out in custom merch. Just a whispered threat wrapped in silence and violence. And here's the final, most sinister layer of misdirection: Roman didn't wear gold. He didn't come out draped in the Universal Championship. He didn't flash it. He didn't even allude to it. Why? Because if he had, it would have made the audience focus on titles again. And that's not what YTC is after, not immediately. That's the point. This wasn't about taking belts. This was about rendering them irrelevant. If Roman had come out with his championship, the assumption would be that this was a feud between two top-tier champions. One trying to outdo the other. The usual alpha struggle. But by showing up with nothing, no belt, no gear, no music, he reset the equation. He didn't come for a title. He came for the idea of entitlement itself. And the only symbol he left behind was the bomber jacket. A garment. A uniform. Something you wear when you've already signed the contract, when you've already chosen your side. Rollins didn't get jumped and left in the dirt. He was covered. Marked. Claimed. So if you're a champion right now, on Raw, SmackDown, NXT, anywhere, you have two problems. 1. Your belt doesn't matter the way it did yesterday. 2. Your position is no longer protected by rank. YTC is not interested in the latter. It's interested in knocking it down completely. Which brings us to the locker room. What do you think everyone else was doing while this happened? Watching. Frozen. Because if the pecking order just collapsed, the entire roster is now exposed. No one knows who's safe. Who's next? Who's in? Who's out? And worse? Some of them might have already joined. Because when a group like YTC operates in silence, you don't know who your enemies are until it's too late. That's how misdirection works. It makes you watch the chair while the real threat smiles from the shadows.